The Slavic people first appear, though very scarcely, in Herodotus' writings in the 5th century BCE. However, a considerable lull exists until the 1st century CE, when Pliny the Elder mentioned some Slavic tribes. However, besides some scarce mention, it wouldn't be until the 6th century that a substantial amount of writings would occur, resulting in early Slavs being shrouded in mystery. Despite this mysterious upbringing, with the help of both linguistics and archaeology, as well as help from the scarce early writings, we can approximate their general homeland. For the sake of this video, we will assume the location of this area is east of the Vistula, west of the Dnieper, and north of the Carpathians. From this assumption, we can continue the video unhindered by such a question, as ultimately, for this video, the exact origin of the Slavic people actually means very little. In the 1st century CE, the Germanic tribes, who the Romans had foolishly failed to pacify, began to raid Roman territory, though they ultimately failed, allowing Rome to expand further into the Balkans. These invasions, however, only provided a taste of what was to come. The Hunnic invasions, spurred by their own defeat by the Avars in northern China, overwhelmed the various Indo-European tribes of southern Russia. In 370, the Germanic Empire of the Goths was overwhelmed and defeated. This defeat spurred the Slavs, who had been largely under its rule, to flee the Huns and settle in more western parts of Europe. This was made possible as the Germanic people who had settled the region had been on the move into their various Roman provinces, leaving much of their territories empty and primed for Slavic settlement. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, Slavic migration further into the Balkans grew in intensity, with the Slavic population in modern Hungary, as well as the Veneti Slavs in Dacia. The Hunnic invasions into Roman territory led Attila to establish his base of operations in Slavic Hungary, beginning the ethnogenesis of a Slavo-Hunnic culture. Although the Hunnic invasion into the Balkans had temporarily stopped the German incursions further into Roman territory, after the collapse of the Hunnic Empire, Germans began to once again move further into Rome, allowing the Slavs to once again move into these new vacant lands. The Slavic migrations were not, however, all peaceful, as by the 6th century, Slavic raiders crossed the lower Danube, targeting the rich provinces of Macedonia, Thracia, and Euripus. Although some Slavic tribes, such as the Antes, eventually settled in peaceful cooperation with the Byzantine Empire, the process of pacification was interrupted by yet another invasion, this time from the Avars, who had forced the Huns to enter the region in the first place. These Avar invaders would push the Turkic Bulgars towards the lower Danube, who would lead an army in 680. The Avar horde took the territory that comprised most of the Slavs. Where the new Slavic settlers differed from the old Germanic inhabitants, is the Slavs took possession of these territories, making it their own, cementing their legacy in these lands. So great was the Slavic domination in the Balkans, that the once Christian lands once again became almost all pagan. The first Slavic kingdom to gain independence were the Moravians. In rebellion against the Avars since the early 600s, the newly established Frankish Empire sent Samuel to guarantee their support for the rebels. However, Samuel quickly realized it was leadership they lacked, and soon took charge, establishing Samuel's empire around 631. After a brief war with the Franks, who desired the territory, the empire was left alone, although it quickly fell following Samuel's death in 659. The second such kingdom was the Bulgars, who we touched on briefly before, crossed the Danube in 680 before establishing a state after a brief but tense negotiation with the Byzantines. The Bulgars and Slavs quickly got along, establishing the groundworks for the modern Slavic Bulgaria. The Bulgarians would gain northern Thrace in 711, after the Bulgars helped Justinian regain his throne. The Bulgars would continue to cement their rule, expanding and slowly integrating within the Slavic population. In 819, the Croatian prince Ludovic revolted against his Frankish masters. However, by 822, his revolt, which had spread from the Slovenes to the Slavs on the Timok River, had been all but destroyed before his murder. The Bulgarians, taking advantage of the instability, occupied much of the revolted Slavs. Thus, a cold war within the Balkans set in, just in time for the Christianization of the Slavic people. The Christianization of the Slavs began with a mixed success, with the Slovenes being Christianized by the turn of the 9th century, and missionaries, loyal to Rome, slowly began to convert the Moravians. This conversion would be largely complete by the end of the century. The Balkans, however, saw a much more complicated situation, with the region split between the Byzantines, who were loyal to Constantinople, and the Franks, who were loyal to Rome, and finally the Bulgarians, whose loyalty was sought after. The Battle of the Balkans began in a dispute over religious control over Dalmatia between Rome and Constantinople, with both claiming the right to lead the Christianization efforts. The Croatians, who had established an independent state in the 830s, looked as if they were to fall under Byzantine influence, although a brief civil war ended in the pro-Catholic faction taking power, cementing Croatia as a Catholic kingdom in 879. The Serbians were heavily targeted by the Byzantine Emperor Basil I, who was slowly put under Byzantine influence. The Serbian state was generally seen as being Christian by around 870, putting them under Byzantine influence, splitting Dalmatia between Rome and Constantinople. Upon the accession of Boris I of Bulgaria, which, although his territory had been influenced by the Christians, saw that much of the ruling class was pagan. Boris knew, however, if Bulgaria was to be taken seriously, he needed to steer the nation to Christendom. Boris, concerned with the influence of the Byzantines over his country, began to flirt with Rome. However, he soon went back to the Byzantines when Rome failed to promise him what he wished for. Finally, in 870, Bulgaria became officially aligned with Constantinople. The Bohemians were first Christianized in 845. However, it wouldn't be until 895 that Bohemia was formally recognized as a semi-Christian state under Rome's authority. The connection between the Duchy of Bohemia and the Frankish Bavaria grew only stronger after Moravia fell to the Hungarians in the 10th century, eventually putting Bohemia under the spell of the German Empire. By 966, it can be assumed that Mieszko controlled much of the southern Polish tribes. Mieszko, though a powerful ruler, feared a fate similar to that of Bohemia, turned to the Bohemian Duke Belaris I as opposed to German missionaries. Mieszko's marriage to his daughter Dobrova cemented this alliance. In 966, Mieszko himself accepted baptism. This policy of anti-German influence seemed to have worked. However, by the 990s, the Polish-Bohemian alliance broke down over the dispute over Krakow. The Russians, for their part, were the last major Slavic group to be Christianized. Kiev, to which Russian power rested in, began to be Christianized in the 860s. However, by the 880s, Christianity had been wiped out in the region. By the 940s, the constant contact between Bulgaria and the Byzantines through trade began to revitalize Christianity. However, the land of the Rus was unlike other Slavic lands of the time, as it was a crossroads of four religions: Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Norse paganism, brought by the very Norsemen who had founded Rus. When Vladimir I came to the Russian throne in 980, he was undoubtedly an adherent to Norse paganism. However, he soon realized the reality of the disadvantages of having a pagan state in both diplomacy and trade. He looked to Islam and Judaism, as well as Roman and Byzantine Christianity. However, he decided to be baptized in the Byzantine Rite in 987. With the Russians formally Christianized, this secured the position of the Slavs in Eastern Europe. The end of the chaos that followed the fall of Rome, allowing the Slavs to rapidly expand, ended, making the position of the Slavs relatively secure. Only in Romania, Hungary, Austria, and southern Greece did the Slavs disappear, as well as some regions in Germany. The new Slavic nations would go on to play massive parts in Europe, as well as world history.